Welcome to Just Energy Radio with your host, naturopath and medical intuitive, Dr. Rita Louise. We have learned from Einstein's theory that matter and energy are one. Physicists believe that all systems in nature have their own particular way of vibrating. From the swinging of a pendulum to the waves of the ocean to the light that brightens the sky each day, each of these oscillates at its own unique rate. The same holds true for every thought, feeling, event, or word we speak. Each has its own frequency or rate of vibration. What many of us don't realize is when we take everything in our universe down to its simplest form, it is all just energy. Join Dr. Rita Louise on a journey through time and space where past, present, and future collide. Today, what you believe may be called into question. What we want to know is, who made up the rules? Be brave and step outside the box. We are about to turn our world upside down and venture into the unknown. Hold on. We are departing our own beliefs and entering alternative realms. Enjoy the possibilities.
Hello and welcome to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the show today. Don't forget, Just Energy Radio, you can listen live on the Inception Radio Network. You can listen online. You can go and download their app for your iPhone or the Android, for your Android phone, and listen while you're at work or in your car, which is always cool. Or you can check out the Just Energy Radio webpage, which is www.justenergyradio.com. Check out the archives there, or sign up for our weekly newsletter that'll keep you informed of all our upcoming guests. Just Energy Radio is brought to you by soulhealer.com, where you can find out about all the services I personally offer, which include medical intuition evaluations, psychic readings, or energy medicine consultations. You can find out about that at www.soulhealer.com. So on the show, I've been talking about my new book, Man-Made, The Chronicles of Our Extraterrestrial Gods, and I wanted to let the listeners know that, one, we have just released the book in the Kindle edition. We've gotten so many requests for the Kindle edition, so if you're interested and you're a Kindle person, it's on Amazon.com right now, and I have a secret for all of you. If you go to Amazon Black Friday weekend, so not this weekend, but next weekend, obviously right after Thanksgiving, we're putting it on sale for $4.99. That's almost half the cover price of the Kindle-only edition. So if you want to get your copy of Man-Made, The Chronicles of Our Extraterrestrial Gods, you're not quite sure, you want a bargain, Black Friday. I like Black Friday. And you don't even have to get in line or stand out in front of a store. You can just go on Amazon and download it. Boom, it's on your Kindle. Let's see. Also, next Friday is our Thanksgiving show where we have an open phone line. It'll be me and my co-author, Wayne LaLiberty. We'll be taking your calls. We'll be talking about anything that happens to come through our minds, including ancient mysteries, UFOs. Call in, join the conversation. I will also be doing on-air readings for those of you that are interested in getting a psychic reading from me on air. How good can that be? All right, I'm done with all my little announcements for today. I have two great guests on the show, and it's interesting because I met both of them at a conference in Sacramento, and you know how those synchronicities work. They both are on the show today. In the first hour, we're going to be speaking with Paul Bradford about ghost tech. And in the second hour, we're going to be speaking with Lyle Blackburn about beasts, monsters, and Bigfoot. So let me tell you a little bit about Paul and get him on the air, because he's a very cool guy, and I'm excited to have him on. The vast majority of us know Paul Bradford as the level-headed, super cool tech guy on Sci-Fi Channel hit spook show Ghost Hunters International. Using and building all sorts of gadgets and gizmos to catch a ghost or two is all in a day's work for Paul and the slightly unconventional but very workable team of investigators around him. So from creepyhollowgear.com, please welcome to Just Energy Radio, the super cool tech guy from Sci-Fi's Ghost Hunter International, Paul Bradford. Hey, Paul, how's it going?
It's going good. How are you?
I am great. It is so nice to have you on the show. I I really enjoyed getting to hang out with you in Sacramento. I think you're like the super coolest guy, and now we get to hang out on air.
Fantastic! You built me up now. I'm gonna disappoint horribly, I think.
No, you won't. I think if if people are curious, they can go to the Just Energy Radio webpage and click on the pictures link, and there are these pictures of you and me, and I think Micah, and we're all like making faces and being goofy, and I like that because I may be a little goofy. I mean, not that I would ever, say that on air or anything, but
no, of course not.
Of course not. No. Okay, but let's get a little serious here, a little bit.
Okay.
I'm saving the good question for the end, and you know what I'm talking about. So we're just going to start easy, because one of the things I like to do is when I have someone new on the show is just to get a little bit of history, a little biographical information. And so how did you get into ghost hunting in the first place?
Very simply, too much television. It was very, very much based on the fact I just grew up watching too much sci-fi. And just sort of piques an interest. It's the way it goes. I used to watch Doctor Who and the X-Files and all those programs. I mean, I watched Doctor Who before it was cool. So I just basically just watched too much TV and got an interest in it, and then sort of went from there. Started researching and going out at night and investigating UFOs and ghosts and everything else. But it wasn't actually until I got into the US about 7 years ago that my brother-in-law at the time, actually, he had he was part of a team and offered sort of for me to join in and see what they're all up to. And I was like, yeah, why not? Because we didn't have taps in the UK. We had like Most Haunted and things like that. And having an actual team was sort of new to me anyway. So I was just interested in joining in, and I just sort of went from there.
So how did you get involved with being with taps? I mean, that sounds like it would be interesting.
It is interesting, although, I mean, I'm not actually taps. It's actually, the show itself is separate from the team, so to speak. But, GHI itself was a team put together by the network, by Sci-Fi. But basically, I got a phone call, because I was building equipment for my team and a few of the teams around locally. And then sort of word of mouth spread, and other people asked me to build some stuff for them, and it sort of just went from there. And I used to get people asking me, if it's possible I could go on their radio show and just talk about some of the stuff that I've built. And it just sort of I guess I got picked up. I was on the radar or something, I don't know. But I got a phone call from a TV production company saying, we've noticed what you're up to, and would I be interested in joining a TV show? I was like, why not? I'm not doing anything else. So I did, and that was it. It sort of went from there.
But that's pretty cool. Tech guy by day, TV superstar by night.
Oh, behave, TV superstar.
Never.
No.
And so I'm going to ask this question because I'm not really sure where you sit on this fence. Do you believe in ghosts? Or are you more of the skeptical investigator?
Oh, you can still be skeptical and believe in ghosts. I mean, I think that's a common misconception. I think, there's the people who don't believe. There's believers and don't believers. That's it. People who believe and people who don't. That's the fact of the matter. You can be skeptical regardless. I mean, I'm not going to get a piece of evidence or get a photograph and immediately be like, oh, it's a ghost. I'm going to look at all the alternatives. I mean, I know there's something out there. As far as what it is, I couldn't tell you. There's still way too much research needing to be done. I know there's stuff out there because I've seen stuff. I've witnessed things myself. But as far as sort of what it is, I couldn't tell you. Because, I've not been doing it for long enough. Even people who've been doing it for 20 years haven't been doing it for long enough. Right now, we're just sort of taking baby steps as far as the field's concerned. So, yes, there's stuff out there. We know there's stuff out there. There's enough people coming forward saying, they've seen this and they've seen that. And it goes for everything. UFOs, it goes for ghosts, it goes for the cryptids. All of them. Anything. There's stuff going on out there that we don't know what it is. I mean, we can start labeling stuff and we can throw names at it and everything, but we don't know.
And what's interesting is it seems like in today's day and age, there's more and more stuff coming forward that it makes you scratch your head. Like, how did we miss this for so long?
Oh, I don't know. I think more a case of it's becoming more acceptable. You know, beforehand, let's talk about 20 years ago, barely anybody would come to you with their ghost story. But since TV, since the different shows that have been on, a lot more people are willing to come forward. Same as the UFOs, and same as the Bigfoots and things like that. Because of television, because it's become more of a widely known topic, it's something less of a taboo as it once was. I think we're starting to get more and more stories come forward. Now, whether or not that's because there's a bunch of nutters out there or not, I don't know. Maybe we're all just a bunch of nutters. I don't know. But, you know, the fact is, I think because it's less of a taboo as it was, we are going to start hearing more stories. We are going to start seeing more things come forward, just because it's a topic which isn't sort of shied away from.
But and I agree with what you're saying, and I think it's interesting the number of people, especially with ghost stories, UFOs, not as much, but it seems like just about everyone has some kind of ghost story that they can share with you.
Oh yeah, everyone has. Yep, I get shared them all, which is great. You know, but yeah, there's a lot of people coming forward with their stories. A lot of people who, you know, who. I hate saying some people who still need educating. You know, there's a billion people coming to me with their photographs of dust and you know and hair and lint in front of their camera, and apparently someone's holding it was a ghost, or it was an orb, or it's a vortex, or I don't know. I mean, there's still a lot of people who don't know how to use a camera that are coming forward and saying, oh, I've got this, look, it's a ghost, and it's me. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's just a long exposure. People don't understand that. So, I mean, that's what I'm saying. At the moment, there's still a lot of people out there who don't really know what's going on, and a lot of people who want everything to be a ghost, you know, and I think, you know, everyone wants to have their ghost story as well as those who have one, you know. So, we're still very much in the early stages, I think.
But I think it's interesting that people are actually looking at the photos and thinking there could be a ghost, as opposed to thinking, I'm not going to look at it. I mean, I grew up in a house that, you know, I call him the dead guy, and he lived in the basement. And everybody in my family knew about the dead guy, but no one ever talked about him until I wrote about him in my book and started asking my sisters, and they were like, oh, we all knew about the dead guy, but no one ever talked about it. And so... But it's the same kind of thing. At least people are talking, and there's conversation going on in education, and that's really freaking cool.
Yes.
Okay, new question. So you've been on Ghost Hunters International, and you're the tech guy. So what kind of things, you know, because I'm going to talk a little bit about equipment, or have you talk a little bit about equipment, but what kinds of things in that role were you responsible for? Other than, like... Oh, go ahead. No,
other than what? No, because I don't want to say something now if you don't want me to talk about it.
Well, I mean, did they just make you, like, carry all the heavy stuff around? I mean, that's kind of my impression. You know, it's like, he's like the roadie. Here, just carry all that cable around and everything.
No, actually, I was actually a manager. You know, I'm a tech manager, meaning I actually had in charge of the equipment. I was in charge of everything to do with equipment, and I was even in charge of the evidence review. You know, there was a lot involved, actually. I mean, out of the entire team, I actually did the most work. And, and that's not me just sort of blowing my own trumpet, because before every investigation, I would have to head down to where we have our tech room and everything. And I'd have to get everything out, and I'd have to get everything charged up. I'd have to make sure everything was time synced, make sure everything had the right time, because we're going from time zone to time zone to time zone all the time. So I had to make sure everything was there. I had to make sure we had tapes. I had to make sure that everything was backed up. Everything that you know, everything we needed had to be ready. When we get to the investigation, we could just unpack it, connect everything up, and it's ready to go. And it's a lot more difficult than it sounds, because our DVR system was the most temperamental thing in the world. It does not like traveling. It was a fantastic system. It was a very expensive system. But it doesn't like traveling. Therefore, you know, it was always temperamental. Sometimes it would tell us it's recording and it's not. Sometimes, you know, it would just not turn on, just for the hell of it, just for the sake of doing it. You know, it would do that. So I'd always have to make sure there was a backup system, and I had to make sure that backup system worked as well. You know, we had to make sure the cameras were all focused, and that, because each investigation there's different amounts of light, and we're not using just ordinary infrared cameras. We're using our full spectrum low lux cameras, which basically we have to set them to the light source that's available at the time. You know, if we're outside and it's a full moon, that means it's going to be a lot brighter than if we're outside and there's a little bit of a moon. You know, and it makes a big difference as far as those cameras are concerned. You know, and then obviously there's other things that when something breaks, I have to either fix it or I have to send it back to LA and have them send me a replacement. There's a lot involved, actually, a lot more involved. So anyway, that would be the things I do before the investigation. So then when we get to the investigation, then I have to basically decide where the cameras are going to go, where everything's got to be set, where do I think everything's going to get the best evidence, what's the best ones to look for, because we only have a limited amount of cameras, and sometimes there's like 30 different claims. So I have to decide on which claims we're going to head for, you know, try and hit first. You know, if there's no power running in the location, I then have to use a different system. I have to use these mini DVR systems that I have, which basically plug into the camera. Everything's battery operated. I have to make sure there's a backup battery as well, so that it lasts a little bit longer. You know, it was just a case of making sure everything that we used worked. But in addition to that, I also had to make sure that we were trying out new things and that we were trying, you know, experimenting with different stuff, whilst not impeding upon the other equipment that we're using. You know, so there was a lot more to it than just place cameras and set audio going, you know.
I'll bet it was a lot of fun having access to kind of the latest and greatest equipment to play with, you know, being a tech guy. It's like, here, play with this new toy.
Yeah, we didn't often get a lot of people. I mean, some people would send us a few things, which is awesome. But a lot of people would send us crap. You know, I mean, we got sent some stuff. This is the latest Spirit mic, and it records theoretical wavelengths. I'm like, well, how do you record theoretical wavelengths? When they're theoretical, you know, and I just, you know, some people are really out there. I mean, there's out of the box thing, and then there's like people who are just way out there. But you know, yeah, it's fantastic. But a lot of it came from ourselves. I mean, the laser, for example, that laser burst, all those dots in there, that was stuff that I'd been working on for like 7-8 years. You know, and then when I introduced it to the show, everybody then runs out and buys one.
Did they buy them from you?
Well, I wasn't selling them at the time.
Oh,
you know.
bummer. Well, you should. Dang, Paul, you could have had a little cottage industry there.
Yeah, you know. But, you know, that's the thing as well. The interesting thing about that is I was using that burst. I was like the first person to start using that. You know, when it comes to the Ghost Sunset, I was the one who introduced it to television. It was me. I've been doing the research on it for years before I even introduced it to television. And now you can even see a very similar principle used on Paranormal Activity 4, the new one that just came out, the movie. They use the same system. They use the dot system, where it's actually a Kinect they use for the Xbox that sends out all these infrared lights. But it's the dot system. It's the same principle I was using, you know, 7 years ago. It's very interesting. But I will never get credit for it, of course. That's such as the name of the field.
I'll give you credit. I'll be like, hey, Paul designed that, you stealers.
Well, no, see, I didn't design it. I just came up with that concept. Like anything we had to do back you know, 6 years ago, we'd have to take a tool that was used for one purpose, and we'd have to adapt it or use it for a different purpose. You know what I mean? We'd have to go to Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever else. What was that other one? There was Bay Trading and all that sort of thing, or Harbour Freight or something like that. And we'd have to go to these places and we'd have to buy something that we can maybe adapt to something else. And that's what, you know, that's what it all comes down to is making use of things that weren't for one thing, but we're using them for something else. And that's what we were doing. And that's what I did with the laser. You know, I use it on the same principle as using those pin-art machines. You know, if something breaks the light, you're able to determine size, shape, and all that coming from. And the idea I actually got from Resident Evil, watching the movie. Again, it all comes down to science fiction.
And so, yeah, and explain the concept of this laser thing. So it's shooting out a bunch of different beams of light, and you're waiting for something to break the beam. Is that the general idea?
Essentially, yes. What it does is it gets a single LED, a single laser diode, and it basically bursts out, runs it through a filter that then shoots out thousands and thousands of dots. Now, the idea is I can point this down a hallway, place a camera mounted. I actually use a still photography when I use mine. And basically what I look for is distortion in the light. I know nobody's going to be in front of that camera. I know there's nobody there because I'm standing there pressing the button and taking the photographs. So if anything in the photographs comes up, has distorted the light. Therefore, there's a black mass. Now, what we're basically looking for here is the difference between a black mass and a shadow figure. Because I've caught both. And I could tell the difference between the two because a shadow figure doesn't distort the light. It won't burst the because it doesn't have a mass. But a black mass will do because it's a solid. It has some sort of solidity to it. That therefore the light starts to curve around any sort of angles it has. You know, so that's essentially where the idea came from. As I said, you know, watching too much TV.
Well, let's just kind of take that concept one step further. In the investigations that you've done, either with GHI or with this other, you know, other groups or whatever, what has been some of the most compelling evidence that you or your team has captured using, you know, equipment?
I think my favorite piece would be a black shadow figure that we actually got in Serbia. We're in an underground barracks, and I actually have a photograph of this. It was something that we were seeing during the investigation. You know, when something's darker than dark, you know, it's something moving, and we were chasing after it. It made no sound, and there was nothing there when we were chasing it. However, I mean, I must have taken over 100 photographs, and in one of those photographs, this shadow appeared. And I had the laser going as well, and it didn't distort the laser. So, therefore, whatever it was didn't have a mass, which also then solidifies the fact it wasn't one of us. Even though everybody's actually in the photograph, my camera guy's in the photograph, Susan was in the photograph, and I'm behind the camera taking a picture. So, everyone there, you know, everyone's there. So, whatever that was, I mean, I think, in my opinion, the most compelling piece of evidence that I've ever personally caught. I mean, there was the video that we got. It was in Canada with a cigarette moving. That was pretty cool because we did everything we could to try and debunk that. I mean, you didn't necessarily see that bit on the show, the debunking side of it. But a cigarette rolled, and it rolled back. You know, it was very weird. You know, you think, okay, maybe it's a vacuum in the room, or maybe there's a breeze or anything. Maybe someone walked past a table and it caused, you know, some sort of a wind to move it. We tried to we recreated everything that we could, and there was no, you know, we couldn't recreate it. And it was all on camera as well. There was no sound coming from it. If somebody had walked past, you would have heard them walking past. If somebody was blowing on the thing, it would have actually taken two people to blow on it. It would have taken one person one side and one the other. But because it was on camera, it was all, you know, it was a fantastic piece of video footage. Because we were looking for some guy who smoked, you know.
And he just wanted a drag.
Oh, he just wanted to have a cigarette. That's all it was.
That's right. You bring up an interesting point. So when you go into an investigation, you know, there are different, you know, kind of mindsets. There are the people that go in and just want to document activity, and then there are people that are looking to, you know, not disprove, but really get down to the core of what's actually going on. And so with Ghost Hunters International, I mean, was that really kind of one of your tenets, that you would go in and look for anything that would cause a supposed phenomena to happen?
It varied from team to team. I mean, obviously, we were split into 3 different groups. Barry and Chris, myself and Susan, and Scott and Joe. And each group had their own way of doing things. My initial thing is to go in there and find an alternative. But at the same time, I'll set up trigger objects. I'll put some bait there or whatever, you know. I will direct questions towards whoever we're supposedly looking for. But yes, I will look for an alternative first. You know, and then even if I capture something, I try and find the alternative to that. Just because we've caught something of interest, it's still just another claim. So I have to then find out, you know, if there was another reason why it did that, or, you know, what could that have been? And, you know, so, you know, just because we capture it, it still doesn't mean that we don't. I'm the hardest on all the evidence that we get. You know, I won't put anything forward that I'm not 100%. So, you know, that's the thing. You know, just because we caught it, it still requires us to try and figure out what it is that's going on and find an alternative.
And so when you would find something, did you always try to have like a secondary source, you know, like you were talking about, you know, the laser lights being distorted, you know, did you always try to have a secondary point of reference?
We'd always, I mean, we'd know what the room looked like prior to anything anyway. We'd have photographs of the room without the lights on and such like that, and with the lights on, and then with the lasers on and things like that. But there was basically we'd have control of the situation as much as we possibly could. I mean, that's what makes us somewhat scientific. I mean, I wouldn't say we are scientific. I mean, we're certainly more technical minded, but it's very difficult to control any sort of situation when we're outside or in a castle. But certainly there's control in that we can stop people from walking in front of the camera, we can stop people from interfering with the equipment, and we can monitor the equipment that's being used as well. So, we just basically have as much control as we can. Mm-hmm. That's what it comes down to.
Uh-huh. And, I think that's the best people can do, at this point in time until equipment gets better or, Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, you mentioned something about recording, and I think it's interesting, a few years ago, maybe more than a few years ago, but not that long ago, orbs with rage. And I think people have finally come to the, or it's gone through the grapevine that orbs, probably dust. But I don't want to talk about orbs because, they're boring now. But
they
it
are
seems...
boring.
Huh?
They are very boring.
But it seems like the new thing that's kind of come into play are EVPs. And what's your opinion of EVPs? Because I have a question.
I hate them. I hate EVPs. Just because, they could be a billion and one other things. Unless it's an actual voice, unless it's somebody, an actual voice with an actual answer to a question that you actually asked, then it's worth pursuing. But if it's just a hey or a yeah, I hate them. What's with the one-syllable words? If you can say one word, you can say two, you can say three, you can say a sentence. I've had ones that say go now, very definite, very go now. I heard it. I was using my real-time EVP recorder. I was listening to it at the time. I heard it. I was asking questions. It said leave now, and then it's about 20 minutes later, it told somebody else to leave as well. It said go now or get out or something. And it was very obvious. That's great. Someone who doesn't want us there, brilliant. There's get out, there's leave now, there's very, very definite wording. Something that says, hey, you can just shove it up your butt. I'm so done with those ones.
See, I'm just really glad to hear that. I speak a lot at paranormal type conferences, and there's someone, and I love all you guys, I'm not dissing you, but someone comes with their EVP stuff, and I'm not a particularly auditory person, so I try to write it off to that, but I'll be with my husband sometimes, and he's has worked as a sound engineer, so he hears stuff, unlike me, and I'll go, okay, did they say anything? Because all I hear is,
yeah,
and they're going, and they'll say something, I'm going, did you hear that? And he's like, no, and then they'll play another one, and they'll say, this is what it says, and I'll go, did they say that? And he's like, no. And I'm like, where do they come up with that? So I'm glad that, you're of that opinion.
It has to be obvious, You can't just have it definitely said something, but, no.
You mean it has to be like real words in English?
Yes. Well, it doesn't have to be English. Bear in mind, I go to all over the world, so it doesn't have to be English. Majority of the time, some of them aren't. And we could be missing some because they're not as well. Because that's what we're looking for, really. I mean, initially we're looking for English words. But let's not put aside the fact that, if something's vocal, you can pretty much identify what it is. Even if it's not a word you can identify that it's something vocal. And usually what we'll do is we'll take something like that and we'll give it to the client and say, hey, does this make sense to you? And if it doesn't, then we throw it out.
So you've gotten, foreign EVPs?
Yeah.
How cool. I mean, you wouldn't even think about that, but I guess that would make sense.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then you don't even have to know if they're telling you to get out because you don't understand. So one of the ones that I did watch was this cave thing in South America. So what was that about? That was one of my
favorite locations ever. I have two particularly favorite locations. One was Australia and one was Belize. And that's the caves. That's the Mayan underworld. It was amazing. As a kid, I always wanted to be either Indiana Jones or James Bond. And certainly on this occasion, I was Indiana Jones because that's the closest I'll ever be Because I mean, this was one of those occasions where, again, you asked about the role of the tech manager. I had to go through I had to make our kit as minimal as possible, yet still be able to capture as much evidence as possible. I also had to make sure everything was waterproof. Everything was going to be okay because we were in the water. I mean, to get into this cave, we had to swim. We had to, it was 20 feet in places. It was deep. There was waterfalls we had to walk through. We had to climb up rock faces. We had to, squeeze through small gaps, and so everything had to be able to get through the caves, as well as the fact it had to get there unscathed, and including ourselves. I mean, we didn't want to get scathed ourselves, but just going there, we had to have a plethora of shots. My arm looked like a dartboard by the time we'd actually finished. But yeah, it was one of the most amazing things I think I've ever done. It was basically like a 45-minute hike into the jungle, through rivers, through more jungle, through river, through jungle, just to get to the area where the cave was. And then we'd have to go 2.5 miles into this cave system. It was amazing. I mean, it was hell. It really was. I mean, Christ, when I was doing it, I was just like, I never want to do this again, ever, ever, ever. I did it like 3 or 4 times. And I was like, I never want to do this again. And then I got back and I'm like, God, that was brilliant. It was hell. I mean, it was mentally and physically draining. I was just zapped. I was beaten and bruised, but at the same time, it was amazing. Absolutely amazing. And I got some amazing photographs from there.
What makes that even more challenging, I would think, is that it's not like you're going to be running any paracord, so it means you have to take everything that's battery operated, and then there's the whole, the ghosts eat your batteries and stuff.
Well, you see, there was lots of claims coming from these cave systems where the people were seeing these balls of light, and there was also like sounds where the people were hearing voices and stuff. And most of it I was able to sort of debunk. I was able to find alternatives for the reasons for the claims that they were coming forward with. But there were things going on that were interesting for us as well. So, it was great. Well, these voices, I mean, we were saying, people were hearing this stuff, and I was tracing it to matrixing. I mean, it was the water. It was the water. The faster the water actually moved, the heavier the voices were, the louder they were. And I set up like a couple of experiments where you saw, you didn't even see me do this actually, which kind of sucks. But I basically set up like 3 or 4 audio recorders, and I was basically placing them closer to to where there's like a small waterfall. And what I was able to determine by listening to the audio is that the closer we got to the running water, the louder the voices got. Which was determining that really all we're doing here is hearing, we're matrixing the sound of the rushing water. The balls of light. I was actually able to identify several materials within the cave system that actually have a chemical reaction which can, in fact, cause this ball of light. I found a giant collection of iron ore. Basically, it was iron. It was a giant magnet. Where the water rushes towards it and it has sand and stones in the water and it hits this rock, it's causing friction, and this friction is causing an energy, and as it continues to do this, it builds up this energy. And it actually had a north and a south polarity. You didn't see any of that, unfortunately. They cut pretty much all of my stuff out. It sucked, because I was really on form during that investigation. But yeah, the way it is, it's the way it is. When it comes to editing, we have no say.
Did they find anything? Did they actually get anything that would have identified it as being haunted?
There was stuff going on that we were unsure of. But at the same time, I think I think a lot of it was, you're in the Mayan underworld. I mean, you're already psychologically, you're sort of fixated on the fact that, there is stuff going on here. You already think there's stuff going on. You've got to try and zone out of that. You've got to try and take yourself out of that. But it was just, there's a lot. I mean, as you walk in there, it's just amazing. It is just an amazing sight, and everything you sort of see and hear, and it's just incredible. But there was a skeleton of a well, they call it the Crystal Maiden. It was a sacrificial victim, around about sort of 16 to 18-year-old female. The bone and such is actually fossilized in such a way that it's actually crystallized. The minerals within the rocks within the caves that caused this fossil to actually crystallize. So there was mineral within the bone structure, so to speak, that would actually glisten and such. I got a really nice photograph of it, actually. It's in my book, actually. Shameless plug there, but still. I have several. I have 2 photography books actually out that I think it's the second one that actually has a lot of photographs from within that cave system. It's an amazing site, as I said, and it was one of those things where whether or not we caught anything we could say was definitively paranormal, it was besides the point for me anyway. I mean, the fact I was there was just what made it for me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so feel free to give yourself a plug for your book, because Paul, I didn't know. Now I'm embarrassed. I didn't know that you had 2 books, because I would have, put it out there before. So what are the names of your books? And
the first one's called Wish You Were Here. And the second one is actually called Here, There and Back Again. Both of them are basically travel photography books. I think I even have a limited amount at home. I think I have like 4 or 5 of each left at home, which, if someone does want to inquire within, they can contact me. They can email me. My email address is creepyhollowghg@gmail.com. The GHG stands for Ghost Hunting Gear, but that's besides the point. Creepy Hollow, all one word. creepyhollowghg@gmail.com. And it's as I say, they're both photography books from traveling the world. There was a thing I saw in New Zealand, actually. It's called a moon bow. I don't know if you've heard of a moon bow.
Never heard of it.
It's a rainbow at night. It's extremely rare to see. Yeah, it's very rare to see. The moon has to be at just the right angle. The moisture levels within the sky have to be just right. And we happen to see it. I mean, it's very rare. And I was able to capture a photograph of it as well.
And it's in your book.
It's in my book. It's actually in the second book, which is the Here, There, and Back Again.
And is that the one that has the crystalline skull in it?
It is, yes. Yeah, it has the crystal maiden in there as well.
See, they can get 2 cool pictures all in one book. Woo-hoo.
Oh, there's a lot in that book. There's a lot of stuff. I mean, where else did we went to Peru as well, and we were able to sort of go to a pre-Incan village, a pre-Incan temple, and within that temple was a statue of the Lansoon, it's called, which is essentially a knife. That's why it's a giant knife, but it's all carved, and it has like the eagle and the jaguar, and their spiritual gods and such like. It had all that there, and it's again one of those occasions where we get to go into the places after dark. We get to go everywhere that the public wouldn't be able to go normally. So it's one of these things. It's just a very, very fortunate thing for us. So that's one of those things that I like to take advantage of. If we're in these places, I will snap away. I will take photographs. If I see something cool, I will snap away, just because I don't know if I'll ever see it again.
That's cool. And that's true. It's like you guys have had access to some really cool locations or areas in old buildings that that might be open to the public, but wings or the attic or different areas that no one gets into.
Exactly, and that's one of the very fortunate things that we get to do.
You also mentioned Australia. So what happened in Australia, and why was it so cool?
It was actually I think it was probably my 4th or 5th investigation episode with the team, and it was the quarantine station, and I basically conducted a solo investigation, which means I was on my own, and I investigated the morgue there, and I was lying down on the slab. And the thing with the morgue there is that there was just the one slab. It was like one room, and then they had like a little breakfast hatch, which led to a small laboratory where they could then basically dissect a body that came in, and then immediately test it to see what it died of, what the person died of, and then they would know whether or not they had to quarantine these people or whatever, you know. So it was basically like on-site facilities. Well, I'm lying down on the slab. I had a shed load of equipment that I was just basically like, I had everything out at the time, and I was feeling like icy cold, and I was even hearing shuffling going on in the laboratory thing. I was hearing like the bottles move, because they have everything out on the thing so you can see what it would have been like and that. Well, you could hear things moving. I could hear footsteps around me. I could hear somebody walking outside. I'd jump up. I look outside. There's nobody there. I locked myself out, actually. So I had to go through the lab and back through the breakfast hatch to get everything. And, you know, it was just an amazing investigation. It's one of those locations which I loved, you know, and it made one of my first as well. So it, for me, is one of those ones that I will remember forever.
A morgue.
The
in
morgue,
Australia.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I know, right?
So what is the coolest place? I mean, so you talked about those, but as far as places that, you know, people are familiar with, you know, have you gotten to go to, like, the Coliseum and do an investigation, or Stonehenge, or I don't know.
Sorry, what was that? Oh.
Did you hear what I said? Do I need to say it again?
I've not been there with the show. I mean, I've been to the Coliseum. I even actually had my initials in some wet cement there. But yeah, no, there was they just put some cement there. I was like, oh, I'm going to put my initials. This is like freaking years ago, you know, well before GHI and all that. Because I used to live in the UK. We used to travel to Europe all the time. You know, I remember I went to Rome. I think I had 2 days off work. I had like Wednesday and Thursday off work. So Wednesday morning I flew to Rome. I came home Thursday evening and then went to work on Friday. You know, it's just one of those things. And, you know, we used to do that all the time. So, yeah, I've been to Rome and but I've never investigated them.
Okay. And see, now that's like going to be a new tourist thing. You know, I had friends that went to Amsterdam and they were hanging out with Jim Morrison's grave in Amsterdam. Right. I won't say what they were doing, but they were at Jim Morrison's grave in Amsterdam. And so now, when I go to the Coliseum, I'm going to have to like look around in the cement for initials and take a picture, you know?
I thought that Jim Morrison's grave was in France.
I thought it was in Amsterdam.
He has a cafe in Amsterdam. Oh. I think it's in France.
It might have been. They were touring around, but I know that one of their stops was Amsterdam because.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, moving along. Okay. And I can only say this with a laugh and a big smile on my face, but what's the spookiest place you ever been to, Paul?
I don't get scared. Don't be silly. It'd be rubbish at my job if I got scared, which is the reason why Scott's rubbish at his job.
Let me just say something to the listeners before you go.
There was a place in Italy that was cool.
Okay. Why was it
Go on.
Well, I just want to say to the listeners, so when I was talking to Paul at the conference and I asked him if he would come on the show, his comment was, but if you make your first question, what's the spookiest place you went to, I'm just going to get pissed off, so I saved it for the end.
Oh, boy. So, Italy. I think that would probably be one of the only locations where I've been somewhat fearful of my equipment. And I mean, you know, my camera and stuff. So, yeah, we were in a fortress. It was actually Fortress Fenestrelli. And we started having rocks thrown at us. Well, it wasn't at me, actually. It was at Susan. So I was fine. So you haven't got to worry. I was okay. But yeah, we had stuff being thrown at us, and I started to panic a little bit because, you know, I didn't know if you could throw a stone, you could throw my camera. And as I've already pointed out, I love my camera, and so the last thing I wanted to happen is my camera to get damaged. So that was one thing I was somewhat fearful of, and somewhat worried that maybe some damage would come of it. But fortunately, nothing did. But yeah, the fact that we had stones thrown at us is kind of creepy.
And these were like ghosts throwing rocks at you, or was it like people throwing rocks at you?
No, there was no one there. I mean, we identified that there was no one there. So whatever it was, didn't want us there. But it wasn't human.
All right, that's kind of weird.
Yeah, indeed. 3 times rocks got thrown at us. And in fact, one time when the rocks got thrown, there was 3 people standing in front of me. 4 people actually in front of me, which is basically everybody who was there. Everybody who was in the top of this fortress, who we'd gone up there with as well, were in front of us at that time. And, there was nobody else there. I mean, it was a case of you'd have to walk 4,000 stairs to get up there. So...
where did they find the rocks, or was it just like pieces of masonry that were?
It was it's just basically I mean, the whole place was pretty much ruined anyway. It was ruins, as well as the buildings and that were falling apart. So, but no, these rocks literally they were getting bigger and bigger each time. Each time they progressively got larger, and it wasn't just a case of they were falling from the ceiling. They were actually coming at us from like the side and things like that. I saw one going straight past me and head towards Susan. And each time, they got bigger and bigger. And there was this one particular time when I had my audio guy in front of me, my guy in front of me, as well as my producer. And Susan was sitting on the floor between the audio guy and the camera guy because she'd already had stones thrown at her twice. And this rock came from the side of me, from behind me, and straight down towards her. And everybody jumped. I mean, in fact, when I was actually doing an interview at the time, and they actually aired the interview at the time, because suddenly you just see me like, fist up and everything, because I didn't know what the hell was going to happen if I was going to have to start swinging. I didn't know.
Had there been complaints or comments about rocks being thrown around there prior, or was this kind of a new thing?
Well, we think that Susan may have said something that pissed them off, but again, we don't know. It had never been done before. Like I said, no reports have come from there, but there's a report now.
In doing the investigations, how often did you find, or what was the most compelling? How often did you find, like, the claims that were made by the owner matched with the evidence that you guys collected? What was the most compelling?
I think there was this one we did in Nicaragua. It was like a fortress. It was called Cayotepe, and the claim was that there was an exorcism taking place, and it was a teenage girl had basically started growing up as this priest was, doing his thing with her. He was doing the exorcism thing with her, and there was a security guy there, and there was, the parents were there and everything, and she threw up, and the security guard witnessed what he said, a black mass, this black thing come from her mouth, from the vomit and everything, into the wall. Now, what was interesting is during the investigation, I got what appeared to be I was saying about the lasers and looking for distortion in light. Mm-hmm. Something came out of the wall. There was a distortion of light coming from the wall. And it only happened once. But the fact that, if it had just been there, it would have been interesting. We'd have presented it as something interesting. But if we're now dealing with something, coming out of the wall, someone said they saw something going into the wall, and suddenly things start to add up, and that was one of the interesting ones. That was an interesting one.
Yeah, no kidding. So in the same breath, we talked about the one that seemed the most compelling. What about the one that there's this big reputation, this place is haunted, and it has this reputation, and by the time you guys were done, your feeling was more like it was hype?
There's been a couple of cases where, like, the people have pulled us in and they said, it's this and it's that and it's this, and we got there and it's like, it's just crap. And in fact, a couple of times they never even made air. There was one particular case that was out in Belgium. It was called the Trenches of Death. Now, not only was the fact it was a completely outdoor location, it was the trenches. It was basically, trenches that they basically reinforced with concrete sandbags. So they'd taken out the old sandbags and put concrete in there so it was solid. And it was now sort of a place that people could visit, which is all well and good. I mean, it's outdoor and it started to rain, so that was great as well. But we started having equipment malfunction as well because of the rain, so we had to shut certain things down and we couldn't use other things. And in the dark, everything looks the bloody same. It's a trench. It's sandbags on either side. It doesn't matter where we are. So it just wasn't even entertaining as far as the show's concerned. You can't, as well as the fact we're doing an investigation, we're also making a TV show. And if everything looks the same, it's not entertaining. So that never made air. There was a case we did in Malaysia, where it was actually called the Puchong Villa. And again, never made air. We got there, and it was just like rubbish. It was just like a gutted out house. There was no windows, no doors. On the top level, there was a homeless guy. Oh.
Hi, everyone.
Wow, there's a plane going over the top of me right now.
Do you live in the flight path? I mean, that's
Yeah, these are military aircraft. So these are all they're doing their routines now. So they're going to spin round and they'll be back in a little while. So that's always nice.
The one that you were talking about with the trench, was that like a World War I military trench kind of thing? I mean, was that the idea?
Yeah, basically it was a military. Oh yeah, it was trenches. It was from I think it's actually World War II. But yeah, it was basically well, that's what it was. It was these trenches. And there was a number of different claims coming from them, but at the same time, it wasn't really anything substantial.
And it was like a tourist place? I mean, I just am trying to wrap my mind around. It's like, oh, yeah, just where I want to go. Here,
you look up online. It's called the Trenches of Death. It's called the Trenches of Death, and it's in Belgium. If you type Trenches of Death, Belgium, you'll find it. So yeah, look it up online. I mean, it's there. You'll see what I'm talking about. I mean, there's other cases where, like, we've investigated castles and that, and when it comes to the reveal, we can't tell her, so we can't say it's haunted. And, they're disappointed. The people who own the place are like, oh, great, because we run a ghost tour, and now you're saying it's not haunted. That's bloody good, isn't it? So, we upset a few people. But at the same time, we're only there for, a few nights. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's not haunted. All we're saying is that, based upon what we've gathered, we can't say that it is.
And I think that's an important point to really talk a little bit about, is that when you go in and do an investigation, you're only documenting what is happening in that moment, and sometimes the ghosts just don't want to come out and play.
Well, that's the thing with the paranormal.
Yeah, sometimes they just disappear like ghosts. Paul, are you there? Okay. Well, maybe we should go. Yep, he totally dropped off. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and take a quick break, and I'm just going to say goodbye to Paul because it's almost break time anyway. That's Paul Bradford. His webpage is creepyhollowgear.com. And we're going to be back with Lyle Blackburn after these words from our sponsors.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.
Can I say something about Man-Made Chronicles? I was so pleased you let me read it in, draft form, I guess it was. And boy, I'm excited about it. So everyone should order that too.
I read your manuscript, which I really, really enjoyed. And what I liked about your manuscript was I got a feeling from it that these kinds of beings and these kinds of stories are actually real things, and that what we're getting down here in our human records is we're actually getting the traces of the actual stories of those beings. I loved the idea of how you brought forth the possibility that the myths that we have and the stories that we have and the religious records that we have are actually their records and their stories.